All right, today we're going to talk about topic 9.3, which is the converse isosceles triangle theorem. So converse means opposite, so it's the opposite of the theorem we've already been talking about. So what that states is, so the converse isosceles triangle theorem states that if two angles of a triangle are congruent, then the sides opposite are congruent. So this is a very important concept, something we need to know and understand. If two angles of a triangle are congruent, then the sides opposite are congruent. So again, it's the exact opposite of the thing we've been talking about through the first two sections. So if I'm going to go ahead and illustrate that in a picture for you as well. So if I have this triangle ABC, and they tell us that angle C and angle A are congruent, those two angles are congruent, then if I draw my arrows from those two angles, then the sides that they point to are congruent, and that makes this an isosceles triangle. So what this is saying is, if angle A is congruent to angle C, then AB is congruent to CB. So it's the exact opposite of what we've been doing. You draw the arrows from the angles to the sides instead of from the sides to the angles. So that's how these things work together. You know that if the angles are congruent, the sides are congruent. You know if the sides are congruent, then the opposite angles are congruent. So let's look at some examples. So on number 1, we're going to find out what x is. So if I look at this, I know this is an isosceles triangle right off the bat just because I see these two angles down here are congruent. So if I take this and I draw it to these two sides, and I know this side has to be congruent to this side. If two things are congruent, they're equal, I can set it up and solve. So this tells me that FD is congruent to DE. So now that I know that, I can go ahead and write out 6x minus 10 is equal to 44. Easy solve here. Plus 10 on both sides. That comes down. I got 6x is equal to 54. Divide both sides by 6, and I get x is equal to 9, which is exactly what I wanted. We were trying to find x on that one. Moving to example 2. If I have this triangle ABC, you can pause and take your time to draw it. Triangle ABC, and I know that A and B are congruent. I know all off the bat this is an isosceles triangle. The thing we're going to try to do is find x, find AC and BC. So we know now that this is an isosceles triangle. If I go ahead and draw my arrows from these two angles, I know that tells me that this side here is congruent to this side. So I know those two sides are congruent, so that tells me that AC is congruent to BC. Now that I know that, I can set these two things equal to each other. So we got 5x plus 50 is equal to 10x minus 100. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 10x from both sides. All this extra stuff comes down. 5 minus 10 is negative 5x plus 50 is equal to negative 100. Make sure you keep track of your negative signs. Now I'm going to subtract 50 from both sides. That goes away, and we get negative 5x is equal to negative 150. I divide both sides by negative 5, and I get x is equal to 30. Now that I know what x is, I got to find out what AC and BC are. So I know that AC is equal to 5x plus 30. I'm going to take that x and plug it back in. So that's 5 times 30 plus 30. So 5 times 30 gives me 150. Plus 30 would give me 180. So I know that AC and BC are the same, so I'm not even going to do the math for the second one. So we know that AC and BC are both. BC is also 180 degrees. All right, so the next thing I'm going to go to is number 3, which is triangle ABC is an isosceles triangle with C congruent to B. If AC is equal to 5x minus 11 and AB is equal to 3x plus 77, find X and AC. So it's a lot of words. We know we're going to have to draw a picture. So we know it says ABC is an isosceles triangle, and it tells us that C is congruent to B. So now that I know that, if I go ahead and draw my arrows, I know that this side has to be congruent to this side, so that's good to know. It says if AC is 5x minus 11, so 5x minus 11, and AB is 3x plus 77, find X and AC. So I know from this picture that AC is congruent to AB. AC is 5x minus 11, which is equal to 3x plus 77. Go ahead and solve. I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides first. Everything else comes down. So 5 minus 3x is 2x. Minus 11 is equal to 77. Now I'm going to add 11 to both sides. That comes down and I get 2x is equal to 88. Divide both sides by 2 and I get x is equal to 44. So now I found X, and they also want me to find out what AC is. So we know that AC is equal to 5x minus 11. So that would be 5 times, we know what X is, it's 44 minus 11. 5 times 44 is 220 minus 11, which would give me 209. So I found out what X and AC are. Write down any questions you have. This should be pretty simple with all the stuff we've already done, just solving and recognizing patterns. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you in class.